All right, so today I'm doing a little suburban street scene here in San Bruno, California, and let me show you what I'm thinking. So this is the scene I am looking at, and I just kind of like the shape of the road going off into the distance. I'll probably incorporate some of the lines on the street as well. All right, my usual palette of colors. I did forget my palette cup, so I just poured out some liquid onto my palette. I'm painting over an old 16 by 20 inch panel. I've got an assortment of brushes, but I've mostly been using this number 10 synthetic flat from Rosemary. It's an ivory series brush. All right, so I'm gonna map out the shapes with some simple lines using burnt sienna. Whenever you're painting over an old painting, the key thing is to eliminate the original image as soon as possible, because as you can see it can be really confusing. But basically I have the road going up into the distance, just a few simple lines to kind of indicate where the big shapes are. All right, for the sky I'm using a mixture of titanium white, cobalt blue, and ultramarine blue. And I often start with the sky because it's one of the easiest shapes to establish. You know, I'm just kind of looking at the skyline here, and it doesn't have to be perfect, which is nice, especially at this stage of the painting. All right, for the road, I'm using a mixture of ultramarine blue, some burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and titanium white. So I'm just putting in a thin layer of paint to eliminate the old painting, and then I can fine-tune things afterwards. I think one of the most challenging things for beginning painters, or even for experienced painters, is to, you know, to look for shapes instead of things. And when you start looking in terms of shapes, you'll start seeing compositions everywhere. And so this scene is one that I've driven by for years and always liked the shape, you know, of the street winding off into the distance. All right, now I'm mixing up a dark using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna and a bit of titanium white. And I'm just squinting at the scene, looking for simple shapes. So there's like this group of buildings right here. I'm just massing this in, no detail whatsoever. Then it's dark over here as well. Okay, so already starting to take shape. I gotta put in the grass over here. All right, so for the sidewalk, I'm using a mixture of titanium white and yellow ochre. I really enjoy actually painting over old paintings. As challenging as it is, you know, I like the effects that I've been getting lately with this. And I'm using a sort of worn out number 8 natural bristle flat at this stage. All right. Okay, and for the grass, I'm using a mixture of ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, cadmium yellow, lemon, and alizarin crimson. One thing I have noticed painting over old panels is that I often misjudge the saturation. So I'm going to try to remember to push the saturation in this painting. It's strange, for some reason I get it home and it kind of looks dull. Okay. All right, so I've got some titanium white and ultramarine blue here, and I'm just gonna mix this directly on the panel here into this area of the road. This portion of road here is actually lighter, and as usual, I'm gonna be adjusting these colors. All right, I'm actually seeing more red in the road, so I'm adding some dioxazine purple to this mix. I think red is the hardest color to determine in a mix. In other words, how much red is in the mix. At least it is for me. All right, mixing up a dark green here using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and a little bit of this leftover green mixture here. I find that squinting and just focusing on shapes is just a lot more enjoyable and less stressful, you know, as far as the painting process goes. You know, when you're trying to paint a thing, it can really be overwhelming, but all I'm just looking for is just, you know, just shapes out here. It doesn't matter what they are. All right, mixing up a color for some of the trees in the distance using some burnt sienna, cad yellow medium, and a bit of alizarin crimson. I'm just gonna push the trees up over here so there's more of a slope. And then there's trees in the background, but those are going to be lighter in value and a bit bluer, reducing things like cars to shapes. If I put a couple of highlights on it, it could actually look like a car, and hopefully it will. All right, so I'm trying to pay close attention to the value relationships here. As you can see, like this road is a lot darker than the sidewalk. So I'm just making some of these value adjustments. You know, I'm gonna just see how that looks. And then I'll also, you know, adjust the color if it's not right. All right, dipping directly into the CAD yellow medium. I want to make sure that this grass feels like it's in full light. All right, and lighten this up a bit too, especially the grass that's, you know, kind of closest to me. All right, so going in with thicker paint in the sky using titanium white, ultramarine blue, and a bit of phthalo blue. I'm probably not going to do that much more on this painting just because you know, I don't want to overwork it, and I like the idea of leaving paintings a little less finished than maybe you're comfortable with, as a way to prevent overworking. All right, so here is the completed painting. This painting took me about an hour and a half. I did not want to overwork as usual, and the focus was on keeping the shapes simple. The most complicated shape, I'd say, or shapes, are like this, you know, group of trees and houses, and this group of trees and houses over here. I was careful to make sure that the geometry of the road or the street was accurate, you know, just so that I had a nice sense of depth here, which is what kind of attracted me to the scene. I kept on darting my eye back and forth from the grass to the street, comparing those colors, and that's how I determined I needed more, you know, more blue in this or more purple in this street mixture here. And then also I was comparing the value to the, you know, to the sidewalk. Oftentimes in the past, I would warm up the street to the point where it wasn't blue anymore. It was kind of more of a gray. But like I said, I did see quite a bit of blue and purple in the street, and I'm actually happy with the way it turned out. I'll show a close-up of the cars here. Just basically a mid-tone with highlights and dark bits. You know, same thing over here. And the ones in the distance are actually just dark strokes with a bit of highlights on them. And the houses are also just loosely suggested. All right, so after the scrub in, which was done with that worn out natural bristle number 8, I switched over to the synthetic number 10, and I used that brush for the rest of the painting, so single brush. And I like that brush because it keeps me out of trouble. You know, it's fairly large and doesn't allow me to get bogged down in details. So things like the cars and the houses were just suggestions within a larger shape. You know, like over to the right, there was a grouping of houses and trees and that sort of thing. And to the left, sort of the same thing. And anything within those shapes is kind of suggested, just like slightly lighter or darker values within those shapes, but not breaking up the overall design. There are a few things I remember from when I first started painting. I had people tell me, or I read, you know, a couple things. Number one was use the largest brush you can for as long as possible in any given painting. And then also paint shapes, not things. And it takes a while to embrace these principles or internalize them because it's not natural. I think we're naturally drawn to details when we're staring at something. You know, it's kind of part of how we see. We're loading information. But as painters, it is our job to kind of see things as shapes of color and not think of them in terms of things. And I think once you do make that transition, your work is going to look less amateur, and at least I noticed that was the case for me. You know, it was sort of a big step up when I first started, or when I was able to break things down into shapes. And one of the things that's really helpful for that also is squinting. You know, squint at the scene in order to see the big shapes. That's another thing I kept hearing, and I didn't do it for many years. So use a big brush, squint at the subject, paint shapes, not things, and have fun. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, Patreon link down below. Got a bunch of extra videos and a materials list, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative, and I'll see you guys in the next video.